Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. Post Minnesota. Even saying that hurt a little bit. That one stung this week, and it really changed the nature of the season. So we're going to talk about that. Usual crew with me here today: Eric McKinney, Mark Culkin. I'm your humble substitute host, Chris Arledge. Guys, let's jump into it, and I'll say that I'll say before we do this that there are losses that hurt, right? All of them do, and then there are losses that are really a gut punch that just leaves a really sour taste in your mouth for a long time. I'm not over this one from Saturday. All right, so from my perspective, this was a promising season that is now teetering on the edge of the abyss. So you can tell me whether you agree with that or not. And then let's talk about what's gone wrong since we were all so optimistic after that LSU game a month ago. Mark, why don't you start us off?
So you described it as a gut punch. I kind of felt like my corner, I'm in the fight. My corner threw in the white towel. They quit. And I know the team didn't quit, but when the other coach after the game kind of calls out your corner for the way you're fighting the fight, it's not a good sign. USC was running the ball at will, almost 7 yards per carry. I know Woody Marks is getting 6.2 yards per attempt. He had 134 yards in the game. USC had 170 something yards rushing. You've got 3rd down and 4, and you're throwing the ball. Coaches constantly talk about putting the team, their players, in the best position to win. Shouldn't the coaches be doing that also? I'm not so much mad that I got punched in the gut. I'm mad because of the way USC fought the fight. And it was just bad strategy. It was set up. Lincoln Riley finally has a defense that he can rely on. Yeah, they're going to make mistakes. They're going to miss tackles. Nobody's perfect. Not asking anybody to be perfect. We just want, the mistakes to be limited. But when you don't have the discipline as a head coach to do whatever's necessary to win that game, because for whatever reason, you want to make sure that everything's balanced and the passing yards are there, and whatever the case may be, it just kind of feels like you're putting ego above the team. And that's what I left that stadium thinking, what just happened? I understand, I don't count the 3rd turnover. That was the last Miller Moss interception. But turnovers, you can't do that on the road. And when you're running the ball, keep running the ball. Make them stop you. It just felt like Lincoln Riley is not ready to take that next step and say, I'm going to be a complete coach. I'm not going to force the issue. And I keep coming back to the fact that PJ Fleck knew Lincoln Riley did not have the discipline to do what was necessary to win this game. When you read those types of comments, that's the punch in the gut. That's the punch in the gut. It's not what Minnesota did. It's what USC didn't do or what they weren't allowed to do. We can talk about the officiating, fighting harder for that 4th down, that 4th and goal stand. Challenge the challenge. Make them show you the replay. I haven't seen an angle yet. So I'm angry, not because I got punched in the gut, but because this team didn't have the right leadership. I'm going to leave it there.
All right, Eric, what's your take? Is this a leadership problem? And are we really teetering on the edge of disaster? Because that's kind of what it feels like to me.
Teetering on the edge of disaster, I think so. If we're using disaster as being sort of out of the playoff race halfway through the season. And I think that we went into the year thinking being one of the top two teams, being in the Big Ten championship game, that felt out of reach this year. But sliding in as that number 3 team, that number 4 team, especially because you had Michigan with the way that team lost so many guys and early in the year. And then when you ended up with that quarterback you were playing against, that one felt like it needed to be a win. And then you've got Penn State at home, and those were going to be the two programs that you needed when you entered this conference. You need to jump, I think, those two with how they were set up this year. And now you've got a Penn State team coming in, and I know we'll talk more about Penn State. But you had enough challenges on this schedule where you needed to check off the boxes of the wins that were there, right? Maryland coming up in a little bit is one, Minnesota is one, Rutgers at home. Obviously, Utah State was one of them. You had enough big time challenges where you needed those games to go your way just by showing up and being better. And in this one against Minnesota, you showed up and you just plain weren't better. You weren't tougher, you weren't stronger, you weren't faster somehow against a Minnesota team that played Michigan tough in the second half, but really kind of got rolled eventually by Iowa at that same stadium. Iowa put up 31 at Minnesota. And so maybe it's part of this, what we had talked about, where you don't know where your sort of bugaboo road trip is. You don't have that long history of, hey, we know we're going to Corvallis. It's going to be weird. That's going to be a strange thing. And so without the history of knowing the personnel, knowing the coordinators, knowing the location, the atmosphere, all of that, there's a lot of stuff that, I mean, you starting to see numbers about Big Ten teams that have to travel multiple time zones and what their record is now. So there was enough kind of weird stuff that when you show up and get hit, we had seen USC over the first handful of games this year. The defensive ends are lighting up pullers. The guys in the secondary are coming up and hitting. The perimeter blocking is okay enough when USC's got the ball, and Minnesota won not every single play, but enough of those plays that, yeah, you come away from this game wondering how USC sort of picks itself up and keeps going. And they will. You have to trust the coaches and the players and everything about this team to know they're going to come out and play hard against Penn State. You're not going to get healthier as the season goes along, right? We saw Anthony Lucas kind of limp off late in that game. Like, you're going to keep getting and taking hits. Not having Eric Gentry was significant. And so now you go down, and now's where those sort of early season predictions maybe don't factor in. Hey, now you're without this guy. Now you're without this guy. Now this guy has got to play banged up the rest of the year. And some of that depth that USC maybe doesn't have at some key positions is going to start showing up. I still think they're going to play. They're going to play with every team. They're going to be able to stay in most of these games. The idea that, they're absolutely going to lose 5 games, absolutely going to lose 6 games. They're going to have a shot in the rest of these games. But no, this one makes it tougher to see. You got to like erase some of those pencil check marks you had at Rutgers and against Maryland and those kind of games. And SC's they're gonna have to play. They're gonna have to play and play harder. Again, it's not like what Mark says. It's not a question of did you try hard, did you play hard, but the hits, right? When you meet somebody in that game, Minnesota was falling forward too many times against USC.
Achille Arnold. I mean, welcome back to after missing a game, right? I think his first tackle attempt, he was sitting on his butt. He wasn't ready for that.
And I mean, Minnesota's running back, really good. Again, I don't know a lot of USC fans, and I'm probably guilty of this too, where you look at, okay, skill guys in the Big Ten. That's a good running back. These offensive lines are big. They're good. Like, you don't just get to show up and check off a win, especially on the road in this conference.
Yeah, he is a good running back. that's a running game that didn't do anything against anybody else. I mean, the frustrating thing about this is that Minnesota, it's not that Minnesota is a really good football team. They're not. They're okay. That's all they are. They're just okay. It's a running team that couldn't run the ball against anybody coming into this season. They couldn't score points against anybody coming into this game. I mean, they blew out the nobody they played, but you know, they had 3 FBS opponents, none of which are killers this year. They lost all 3, and they couldn't score points. I mean, you know, they're hanging around 17 points, 19 points. So I'm disappointed with the defense. But I also knew coming into the game that that the Trojans were missing their most impactful front 7 player. Not that it's a shock that Eric Gentry gets hurt and misses a game, right? I mean, I'm not ripping on Eric Gentry. I love the guy. But that's his history. He has a very difficult time staying healthy. When he's out there, he is a difference maker. And USC wasn't very good at linebacker the other night. They weren't. Those guys had a lot of tackles, but the truth is, when you go back and look at a lot of the big Minnesota runs, it wasn't most of the time that defensive linemen were getting driven back 3-4 yards. That's not what was happening. You had linebackers who were very slow to fill the hole, very slow, and it happened over and over and over again. I mean, one of those big runs came where the play side linebacker was so slow that he gets blocked by the backside guard. The guard didn't pull. No, he just scraped over the top and blocked him. Like, you got to go, man. You got to go. If you're running to grass, you're going to make that play. So they weren't great. The pass rush isn't great, but I also know going into it, this is a defense that is, especially in the front 7, is okay. They fight hard. They play hard. They do their assignments. But it's not a hugely talented group, right? It's just not. And where you have talent is mostly at the edge, and the edges haven't been able to rush the passer all year. So maybe I overestimated that too. So the defense didn't play well. That being said, if you tell me when Lincoln Riley got hired, you say, look, we're going to start out year 3, the first 5 games, USC's defense is going to give up at most 24 offensive points to an opponent. What do you think the team's record will be? I wouldn't say 3-2. Lincoln Riley needs to score in the high 20s to win a football game. You kidding me? That should be a walk in the park every week. But this offense is a mess. It is an absolute mess. When they're able to run the ball, Lincoln Riley's not committed to it. They can't always run the ball. There have been weeks where they don't run the ball worth anything. But in some of those games, he would stick with it. Here you have a situation where the backs are average. The running backs in that game averaged over 7.3 yards per carry. And it wasn't just because they had, you know, one 80-yard run. It was consistent. They were consistently falling forward. They're consistently, even on the bad plays, picking up 2, 3, 4. Yet USC throws the ball 60% of the time in that game. They throw the ball 60% of the time when they're running for over 7 yards a carry with the running backs, and where they're having trouble protecting the quarterback, and where there is no downfield threat, right? This passing offense is now a can we pick up 12 yards from time to time passing offense. They're not a threat deep. And so I'm looking at it and wondering, well, why do we want to keep throwing the ball when we can't protect Miller Moss and when the running backs are doing just fine? Run the ball. You don't throw the ball 60% of the time in a game like that. That's bad coaching. Lincoln Riley knows more about offense than I do. But Saturday, I would have called a better game than him. That was not good. 3rd and 4, you're up 7, 3rd and 4, inside the opponent's 40-yard line. You have 2 runs to pick up a first down and ice the game. Throw the ball, disaster. It's not like it's unexpected that end got to him, right? It's not like that's the first time all night that the edge guy had beaten one of the tackles. It happened a bunch. It's happened every week, a bunch. So that was eminently predictable. Then they get the ball back 17-17. What's the first thing they do? They throw the ball. The edge dominates the tackle. They're all over Miller Moss, grounding 2nd and 19. Now you're in trouble. That's on Lincoln Riley, man. It's on him. That's not a good job for a guy who's a really good offensive coach. And I know he didn't want to admit that, right? He couldn't see anything that he may have changed. Yeah, I bet you do. And if you don't, Lincoln, that's a problem. I don't know what they do about it. I guess we'll talk about that in a minute, but you've got to right now. You cannot protect Miller Moss against anybody, and now you're gonna go against maybe the best edge rusher on the schedule. I don't know what to do about that. That's a problem.
So-
But go ahead, Mark.
I'm just trying to, close the circle. You said you're disappointed with the way the defense played.
Yep.
Okay. Did they play worse than the offense? I mean, they held the team to 17 points until that fourth and goal stand. Look, they're not going to.
They didn't play worse than the offense. They did not. They also didn't play particularly well. Minnesota also ran the ball over 7 yards a carry all game. And
on the offense, not on the defense, in my opinion.
Well, hold on though. I agree with you that ultimately the offense takes the bulk of the blame. But Minnesota couldn't run the ball against anybody, and they gashed USC all day. And Minnesota had 10 points going into that fourth quarter. They need 2 drives, and twice they go the length of the field and just stuff it down USC's defensive throats. That's not good. And if you're a defensive player, you can't feel good about that. USC didn't have a 3-and-out all night. Not one. Against Minnesota. They didn't have one. I think the Minnesota's worst drive, they got 24 yards, 25 yards, but they were pretty consistently moving the ball all night. And so no, I am disappointed with the defense. But like I said, if a Lincoln Riley defense gives up 24 points, they should win the football game. And they didn't win the football game because the offense is just a grease fire right now. So let's talk about that. Why in the world is this offense a grease fire, and what does USC need to do to fix this? Because they still have 7 games left. They have a season to salvage if they can figure this thing out. Eric, what do they need to do?
I think I could tell you the first part better than the second part. What they need to do is extremely difficult. They've got to figure out if they are okay potentially forfeiting anything that they could accomplish this year at the expense of getting these guys at tackle rep after rep after rep this year, leaving them out there, hoping that it doesn't get worse and that their psyches don't get affected by having to go out there and getting beat. It wasn't on every single play, and there was some help with some quick throws and that kind of thing. But boy, the 2 towards the end on back-to-back snaps, the last play that resulted in the interception, and the first one on the drive you mentioned that was the intentional grounding, they're just huge, and they stand out so much because it's not they're not bringing 8 and Miller Moss is hanging onto the ball and taking a sack. Some of these, they're bringing 3. They're bringing 3. Your guards aren't touching anyone because they don't have anyone to block, and they're still getting around the edge and creating huge pressures and all kinds of problems. So that's the first decision is are you okay at tackle? Have you seen enough to say, yeah, we think they're getting there. We think that they can do it. And that's a decision. I still think that I think you have to give a lot of thought to moving Jonah Monheim. And it never felt like the coaches were all that excited when Killian O'Connor went down about bringing Gino Quinones in to play center and move Jonah then. Killian O'Connor's back now. He got hurt against Utah State, seems to be back fully ready to go, dressed and was there for that game. If you're okay with him, Jonah Monheim has played well at both tackle spots. He could play guard you. He's the guy that lets you maybe plug a hole somewhere. And now when there's a shift, maybe things click. We saw last year when Jarek Hickson got pushed out to tackle, Mason Murphy came into guard. Perfect? No, but capable. and it worked out okay. I know there's a push where, Jonah Monheim's probably an interior guy at the next level. You want to get him some stuff there. When the line is struggling that much, you want your most veteran, sort of knowledgeable guy in the middle, at least making sure things aren't, there aren't fires starting everywhere. So I can understand that, but that feels like a decision that needs to be made now before Penn State. And again, if you're going to say we're okay, which Lincoln Riley seems to keep saying, hey, tackles are fine. Tackles are fine. We want to sort of pour snaps into them and see how they react and keep them out there. That to me stands out as the number one thing. What's your personnel? Because we saw them go to Tobias Raymond. We saw them bring him in. That was a game where it felt like, hey, maybe towards the end here, you shake something up and nothing. Same five guys every single snap, same five guys out there. Tobias Raymond took one as like an extra offensive lineman. So there clearly isn't a big push. Hey, we gotta take a look. We gotta shake this up and do something here. The other thing when there's this much pressure is you say, well, screens and draws and swings. Don't let them get there. Let's throw it out. As much attention as the pass blocking has gotten, what has stood out to me as the biggest struggle for the offense overall and the offensive line, Lincoln Riley keeps wanting to get the ball in space with blockers in front. And they've done okay at that. Woody Marks catches the ball out there, wide receiver screens, whatever. There's stuff out there. Nobody, offensive linemen, tight ends, wide receivers, nobody can get a helmet or pads or hands on anybody down the field. Nobody. And that is what has stood out the most because, yeah, the answer is don't make them block for 4 seconds. Let's bring the rush in, throw the ball over their head. Now we go. There are plays in that Minnesota game where a USC offensive player has the ball with 3 blockers in front of them and 1 or 2 Minnesota defenders, and they're making the play for no gain, 1 yard gain, 4 yard gains. Like that is a problem at least as much as just the pure pass rush getting to Miller Moss. And I don't know I don't know what you do there. If you can't block a guy and you can't throw the ball over the guy and create yards, it's really, really tough. And that seems to be a huge issue for USC in this one. Because there's some plays where Moss drops back, top of the drop, pitches, goes, throws it. You get a guy on a slant. There were some plays where the offense looked good against Minnesota like that, just straight passing. But you try to dial up one down the field, the one to Zachariah Branch where Moss has guys in his face, the one on 3rd down where you're trying to hit Deuce and it ends up the guy hitting Miller Moss and being an interception. They are so limited on what they can do right now. And part of it's just tough at the line blocking guys. And part of it is that they're getting outplayed in space. And a lot of guys are getting outplayed in space right now. It's not always a thing that we talk about with USC offense.
Yeah. Okay, Mark, weigh in on this. What's the offense need to do to fix this mess?
So you're not going to replace Josh Henson midway through the season. So we can take that suggestion, that solution off the table. I know everybody over on the WeAreSC message board says, fire Henson. Great. Then what? You still got the same personnel out there. You still got young guys playing. Well, you got a mixture of guys out there. Eric alluded to, or said it, move Jonah back to tackle. They brought Jonah back to play center for a reason, to help his NFL aspirations. So now you're going to say, you know what? I need you to be the most selfless person in the room right now. I'm going to put you back at left tackle. Elijah Page, we're putting you on the bench. You're not ready yet. Now you're messing with his psyche. Or you leave Elijah Page in. You leave Jonah at center. Do you move Mason Murphy to the bench? Do you move him to right guard? Do you just say, Tobias Raymond, go make it happen? Again, you start making these adjustments, great, you're trying to do something, but how are you affecting the psyche of the team? There is no easy solution. So you're going to have to, again, let's say you move Jonah to left tackle. Emmanuel Prignon is your best offensive lineman right now, most consistent at left guard. You bring in Killian O'Connor at center. You leave Alani Noah or Amos Talalele there at right guard. And then do you change out your right tackle? You have very limited decision, very limited opportunities. Because again, behind these guys, they're just younger. So they might look the part. They might be big. They might have the size to play. They're not ready. I mean, I'm not going to point out which, Eric was talking about it, but there was one sequence out there where one offensive lineman had the chance to hit two different guys on one of those types of little screen passes, and he's literally blocking air. He's running by guys. He's trying to get back to guys. Something's not working on the offensive line, and Miller Moss right now is suffering the most from it. He's getting hit like a piñata out there. Meanwhile, these guys, when you line up to run block, they do great. So what's getting lost in the translation between we can run block with anybody, but we can't pass block to save our lives. You got to find the right personnel package that can do both. And I don't know if they have that right now.
Yeah. I'm not sure Miller Moss is the one that's been hurt the most by this. I think it's me. But other than that, I agree with a lot of what you said. I don't know what you do in the offensive line. I think you have to seriously consider moving Jonah Monheim out. And he does have some tape at center now. And you say you want him to be selfish, and that's true. But you know, Jonah Monheim wants to win football games too. He doesn't want to have his last year become a disaster. I think I probably would move Mason Murphy to right guard. We've had troubles at right guard too. That's also a young guy who's probably not ready to play, and that's probably a spot where Murphy can play all right. He is not a Big Ten caliber offensive tackle. He's not. He needs to be inside, but I think he can do some things inside and help you. The problem is I don't know what you do. I mean, is Tobias Raymond ready to play? Probably not. If he was ready to play, he would be playing. Elijah Page is not ready to play, but you don't have a choice. He's playing. And this gets back to our discussion last week. I mean, I'd really like to ask Lincoln Riley and Josh Henson, if I could, and they were going to be honest with me, is this what you expected? Did you think these guys were ready to go and you just misjudged it? Because what's going on? I mean, this is worse than I expected it to be. We knew he had some potential issues on the offensive line.
Well, how much of this, Chris, though, is predictable play calling, where the opposition's defense knows, hey, let's take a chance and rush the quarterback. We know Lincoln Riley is not going to run the ball more than 2 times in a row on any series.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's some of it, but we've seen enough. We've seen enough now, 5 games in, that we have guys at tackle right now who aren't ready to play tackle or shouldn't be playing tackle. They should be playing inside. That's just the way it is, and it doesn't make any sense to me to pretend otherwise. And you're right that Lincoln Riley needs to deal with this. Eric is right that there is no blocking in space, and he's right. It's not just the offensive linemen when they're out there. The wide receiver blocking has been horrific. The wide receiver blocking has been worse than the wide receiver hands, and the wide receiver hands have been a bitter disappointment, right? Every game, you are killing drives because you're dropping balls that are hitting you right in the face or right in the chest. That's got to stop, man. And at some point, it would be one thing if it was one guy. It's not one guy. It's happening week after week, and it's multiple guys. But the wide receivers have been a problem. Part of the problem is that they don't have a ton of time to do things downfield because the pass blocking is an issue. And if you're a defensive back and you know that the pass that your pass rusher is going to be all over the quarterback, you can really play aggressively in a way that you might not if you had Jacoby Lane and you thought the quarterback was going to have a lot of time to throw, or Zachariah Branch. Lincoln Riley is desperate to get the ball in Branch's hands, And every time he does, Branch is getting hit right away, right? I don't think the opponents think that Branch is going to have that Moss is going to have enough time to throw downfield to Branch. So they are up and they are aggressive, and everybody's doing it, and they're all getting away with it. I don't know that there's an easy solution. I know this: when you're running the ball for more than 7 yards of play, and you have 3rd and 4, and you're trying to ice a game, you run the stupid football. You run the football. That's easy. It's easy, and he knows better. That was just a gigantic mistake. And it's not hindsight is 2020. It's not like, because it was predictable that would happen. It's been happening all year. It's been happening all year. I'm not saying that the tackles get beat every down. Of course they do. Well, Michigan they may have, but I'm not saying that they get beat every down. I'm just saying they get beat badly enough that you have to put that into the hopper when you're trying to make your decision. You cannot trust that Miller Moss is going to get away with dropping back and throwing the ball. So I think I'd move Monheim, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, and that's probably why the coaches aren't interested in doing it.
Let me ask you this: would you make this change and just ride the wave for the rest of the year? Jonah at left tackle, Prenion left guard, Killian at center, Gino at right guard, and Tobias Raymond at right tackle, and just say, you know what? Now we've got a veteran group out there. We're the youngest at right tackle. Do you do that? Because if you put Jaden Mayaba back there at quarterback, yeah, he might make a play for you now and then with his legs, but you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem if you run out your regular offensive line.
Well, that's the thing, is Miller Moss has played well enough, and he's played with guts, that you hate to take him out of the game. But if you can't protect him, you may have to. I mean, I would start getting Mayava some reps. I wouldn't start him and bench Miller Moss. I'm not saying that, but I would start to work him into the game, because at some point that running threat from the quarterback, and just have a big guy back there who can move, who isn't necessarily a sitting duck. I hate to do that to Moss. Moss doesn't deserve it, but that's just where we are. And I think I would get Mayava some reps, and I would mix up the offensive line, because you can't keep doing the same thing you're doing. You look at the schedule now, Minnesota is worse than a lot of the teams coming up on the schedule, not just Penn State and Notre Dame. Minnesota's worse than Nebraska. Minnesota may be worse than Rutgers. Minnesota may be worse than Maryland. I mean, a road trip to Maryland's no easier than a road trip to Minnesota. You look at the schedule, and every game on the schedule is like, oh, geez, that's a potential loss now. So unless you think Paige and Alani Noah are going to grow up very, very quickly, and they might, they're young, they're going to get better. Then you have to make some changes. You're not going to get better at right tackle. He's been playing a long, long time. That's who he is. He's an inside player who's playing tackle. That's the truth. So you're not going to get better there unless you make a personnel change. But I mean, there's no easy solution to this other than run the ball when you can run it for 7.5 yards a pop.
And I think Miller's got to help out there too. We saw against Wisconsin, right? Do you need him to keep it on every 4th and 1 and spin out of 4 tackles and dive into the end zone? No, but you can't have, when you're so reliant on that kind of mesh, zone read, RPO stuff that you do, you can't in the first 5 minutes let the defense just check out of any sort of backside responsibility, and that guy just crashes every single time. I thought one of the plays of the game that isn't the obvious interception, touchdown, whatever, that 2nd and 5 for the 3rd and 4, that play looked blocked okay. Woody Marks maybe got a little jumpy and ran into a Minnesota defensive lineman, and it's a 1-yard gain instead of, if Miller keeps it or holds it a little bit better and Woody Marks follows the blocking, maybe it's 2-3 yards on that play and it's a 3rd and 2 instead of a 3rd and 4, and now you run like those things get lost a little bit. But it's asking a lot to be perfect on all those plays, but there's got to be a little bit more, because Miller Moss is not a statue. Miller Moss can run it a little bit, and for him to just sort of give up on, look, do I want him to take more hits? No, I don't think he can. I mean, he can't run and get hit, but every once in a while, think you have to make a good read and keep it just to alleviate some of that backside crashing from defensive ends in the run game.
Well, when you diagram that play up on the board, you're assuming that Moss is going to hold that guy. You're assuming that, right? And if he's not holding that guy because the guy doesn't have to worry about him, then that gives them an extra unblocked defender. So I agree with that. That wasn't as big a problem this Saturday as it has been in past weeks. But I mean, I didn't think USC would be in this position. I understood they were losing Caleb. I understood there were problems potentially in the offensive line, but I thought Lincoln Riley would find a way to score points. And right now that's not happening. This offense has looked against Michigan, against Minnesota, for a half against Wisconsin has looked awful. I mean, Clay Helton offense, right? I mean, that's what it's looked like. They can't do anything consistently. They turn the ball over. I mean, it's just so he's the offensive guru. He's the one making $12 million a year because he's supposed to be so great coaching offense. Well, get to work, coach, because if you continue to score 17 points a week, you got 6 losses on the way. Now, I don't think that will happen. I'm not predicting that, but that's what's going to happen if they don't dramatically turn it.
The Maiyava discussion to me too becomes, look, if he comes in, you're almost asking to go like quarterback run first offense. Like the hits, the sacks, the whatever, that's not Miller Moss back there, and he can't move or sense pressure or anything. That's him most of the time getting to the top of his drop, finding the read, and getting hit as he's throwing it or before he can throw it, or having to flush immediately. Fixing that means don't look at your receivers, just drop back, look at the rush, and then escape as a scrambler. I mean, that's
Moss actually moves around in the pocket pretty well. He's got a good feel, and I think he's only been sacked 9 times. I think that was the number, maybe 8. If Miller Moss didn't have such a good pocket presence, it would be 20 right now, because he is frequently moving up in the pocket, moving left, moving right, dodging people, trying to get rid of the ball. If you play Maiyava, then what you're doing is you're changing the RPO game a little bit, where you're giving the defense something to worry about that they don't have to currently worry about with Moss. That's what you're doing. And you're probably doing it with a guy who may not be at this point in his career as far along reading defenses as Miller Moss is, but you don't have a lot of time to read defenses when you're under pressure in about a second and a half. So I'm not sure I'm worried about giving that up yet. All right. Anything else on the offense? It actually makes
8
me
sacks
sad
allowed.
to talk about it.
8 sacks allowed for USC this year.
How many pressures, Eric? The most pressured quarterback in the country this year.
At least 9 pressures.
That shows what a fantastic job Miller Moss has done. Not only standing in there taking hits, but also moving around, because there have been stretches of games where it seems like every time he drops back, there are people all over him. That was true against LSU. It was obviously true against Michigan. Against Michigan, some of those guys could have caught the snap instead of Moss catching it. But I don't know. There aren't a lot of good. Here's the solution is you have to have offensive linemen who are either ready to play as true freshmen, and you land those guys, or you have to have more older guys in the program on the offensive line. That's the solution. It's a personnel problem more than anything, and that's something they didn't fix in the offseason that they needed to, and now they're paying the price for it. So, all right, let's turn around and talk about the defense. I still like talking about the defense more than the offense, although I was a little bit disappointed the other day. What does the defense need to do to improve, to salvage this season? Mark, go ahead. I think you're going to tell me they don't need to do anything, and if so, then that's fine. But go ahead.
Look, they haven't been perfect, right? Have they been better than last year?
Oh yeah, I mean everything in the universe is better than last year's defense. I can't think of one thing that's not.
They've been significantly better than last year.
Yep.
At the end of the game, as Kamari Ramsey would say, they nutted up. They made that 4th down and goal stand. It's not a matter of effort. It's a matter of execution or failing to execute too many times, giving up explosive plays. Against Minnesota, the run game, for whatever reason, they weren't as sharp as they've been in the past. We look back to that Michigan game. They actually played the run really well, except for 4 plays. Lincoln Riley would say, well, we're 2 plays away from being 5-0. It's not quite that clear and simple, but the defense, they're not generating a lot of turnovers either. So that's one thing they do need to do better. They're not getting to the quarterback, whether that's because the opposition is scheming for that to happen, where they're not giving USC enough time to get there. PJ Fleck talked about it. The second half, we threw some screen passes. We made USC's defense go, horizontal, but at the same time, we still went vertical as well. So it's a matter of USC's defense maintaining their gap integrity sometimes, making sure they're not over pursuing. And as Eric talked about a little bit earlier in the show, you're starting to feel the impact as the season goes along. Chris, you brought it up. Eric Gentry is not going to stay healthy for the entire year. Anthony Lucas limped off the field. Mason Cobb, I don't think he's 100% healthy. So these types of things are going to start, manifesting as the season goes along. Right now, the secondary, they're playing okay, but they're starting to revert to some old habits. And I think it's because they're starting to panic a little bit, thinking they have to do more than what they've already been doing. I don't have a lot to complain about with the defense. Obviously, you'd like to see them step up in certain situations. But again, what I saw them do at the end of the game on that 4th and goal, they made Minnesota go to the replay to get that phantom touchdown. You're going to have a hard time making me point the finger at this defense right now, because I think they're going to get better as long as they can stay healthy.
Eric?
In this game, it felt like they caught too many blocks. We'd seen them and all the stuff that has got put out early with this defense. A lot of it is guys lighting up guys without the ball. I mean, there was one, and this goes off topic a little bit, but Penn State, UCLA, like the viral play, whatever, the one that got showed, Penn State ran an offensive lineman in motion and just erased a UCLA defensive end. Those were some of the things we saw flipped, right? Where USC, and there was one, so Solo had one in this game where there was a puller or somebody in motion, somebody coming at him, and he lit this guy up, put him on the ground. And now the run lane coming that way is tiny, and it got squeezed, and then there's a tackle there. There wasn't enough of that, especially the 2nd and 3rd level, where you had defensive backs kind of coming in a little bit hesitant. And what I said about USC's offensive players, linemen, tight ends, wide receivers, when they got in space and you needed a block or just touch somebody, get in the way somehow, and they didn't do it over and over and over and over. Minnesota did it consistently. I mean, they had throws to the line of scrimmage that 3 guys downfield for USC got blocked, or you're kind of going backwards and not attacking through anybody. And those are going for 20, 22 yards in key situations. You had a couple plays where you're overrunning stuff. I mean, the idea that like you cannot give up a 20-yard run in a game against a team that's going to run it over and over and over, that stuff's going to happen. It's going to happen. Look, some of the, and this isn't just USC guys getting held, some of the non-holding calls that we've seen this year feel like they would be on official teaching tape of, well, this is clearly a hold. So however you need to play through that stuff or get going that way, or more hand fighting or whatever it is, but that they've got to figure that out. And I think potentially it comes down to, look, Bear Alexander had tons of sort of issues, and there were plays that would pop up where it's like, that's not great for him. But he had plays where he would throw 3 guys around and make a tackle. And it feels like right now USC's defensive front, it's a little bit like I hesitate to say this, Chris, because I don't want you to just log off and quit the rest of the show. Alex Grinch's
Got my
defense,
hand on the mouse. I got
I
a hand
know.
on it. Go ahead and say it.
Alex Grinch's defense needed all 11 guys to be perfect on every single play. If you had one guy mess up, that's a 60-yard run. And it feels like right now in that game, there weren't enough USC defenders just able to like wreck shop and make a play by themselves. It needed all 7, 8 guys near the ball playing really, really well and together in order to make a tackle. And I think that's what we've seen maybe on both sides, where up front, it's this one's just about defense, but it's better. It's absolutely better. But I don't know how many teams come in and say, boy, that guy's really gonna make life tough on us. It's been Anthony Lucas. He's the guy that's been singled out. James Franklin talked about him on Monday. PJ Fleck, I think, brought him up. I know Luke Fickle, I think early on, talked about Anthony Lucas. But where Jaw Joyner from Minnesota was clearly the guy and made 2 gigantic plays in that game late, but still 2 gigantic plays. It doesn't feel like USC has enough guys that are making just key, absolute one-on-one dominant plays for this defense, and that's tough to overcome. Where you have to be all 11 great on every single play. The lack of a pass rush, and look, we're 5 games in. The secondary doesn't have an interception yet. You've got 3 from linebackers, and just like the defensive line can't really generate a ton of sacks, the secondary is not getting its hands on enough footballs right now. And that's gonna start, I think, to be a conversation.
Yeah, what I like about this defense is also what bothers me about this defense. What I like about them is you have a bunch of overachievers that are really playing better than you expected them to play and are playing hard and for the most part are doing their assignments. It's hard not to love those guys. You don't have anybody up front against USC that is difficult to block. That's the truth. You don't. Anthony Lucas is the most talented, but Anthony Lucas doesn't make opposing offensive tackles look the way all the edge rushers that we play against make our tackles look. He doesn't.
Because
He
they
doesn't
tackle
do it.
Anthony, they tackle Anthony Lucas in the backfield. That's why.
Well, okay. I mean, sometimes they hold Anthony Lucas. I'm just saying that
I'll
that
accept a hold there. I'll accept a hold, Chris. They're tackling him.
all right. I'll go look at the tape and see if they're tackling him every single down. I'm pro Anthony Lucas. I think he's been fantastic against the run. I think he's been aggressive. I think he's turned into a really good football player. What I'm saying is I don't think he is threatening opposing quarterbacks nearly as much as you want your best edge rusher to do. And on the other side, they're getting nothing. They get nothing. Now, the last time I said something mildly pessimistic about this particular player, he called me out in person. But Jamil Muhammad has gone the last 12 games with half a sack. You need more from your edge rusher than that. You do. He knows that. I'm a little bit surprised that Braylon Shelby hasn't shown more as a pass rusher. I'm a little bit surprised that a team that has 6 sacks in 5 games hasn't seen what Cameron Fountain can do to see whether he can make something happen. I mean, that's not a guy who needs time in the weight room to be ready. He may have some technique things that he needs to work on, but right now USC can't protect the passer and they can't threaten the other team's passer. And in modern college football, that's a problem. If they were in the quarterback's face, I suspect you'd see more batted balls, you'd see more interceptions, you'd see more of those things, and they're not. And so what USC is doing up front is they're playing pretty disciplined football and they're doing their jobs, but they don't have anybody who blows up plays. The great defenses have guys that blow up plays, right? Think back to Pete Carroll's defenses, the really good ones. They had guys who just blew up plays. Sean Cody and Kenichi Udeze and Mike Patterson would blow up plays. They wouldn't just do their assignment and, we have our gap now. And no, they blew up plays. Cedric Ellis blew up plays. I mean, the three linebackers in 08, they just blew up plays. You had guys that the other team couldn't block. USC doesn't have that level of talent up front this year, and we knew that coming in. They're playing exceptionally well for the talent level they have. The most talented guys are young, and I'm not sure they're ready. And the more experienced guys are playing over their heads. And you know what? More power to them. I love the effort that we're getting from that group. I love the coaching that we've seen to get those guys to play. But if that's where you're going to be, if you're going to be a marginally talented front seven, you have to really get after it. And that was the first week of the season where it just seemed like that defensive front was playing a little bit on their heels and not getting after it the way right. That talk about they knew they were going against what was supposed to be the best offensive line in the country against LSU. They're hearing talk about it's going to be a fist fight, and they came and brought it physically and with aggressiveness. They didn't do that against Minnesota. They better do it against Penn State, because if they don't do it against Penn State, that game could get out of hand. I think they will. I think those guys are going to show up to play next week, but they're going to need to. And I think we need more from the linebackers next week. Those guys have to run. You have to read the play much more quickly, and you have to run to grass and make plays. And if you think to the best linebackers we've had haven't always been the guys who are biggest and fastest. I mean, Groots and Tutupu, it was almost like they knew the play call half the time, right? They would not have been sitting back 4 yards deep catching blockers trying to figure out what's going on. They would have been in the backfield making plays. And USC's linebackers aren't doing that, and maybe they can't, right? I mean, maybe they don't have the ability to read the play that way, but they need better play from those guys against Penn State also. But it's not the defense's fault. The defense is playing better than defenses have played in many years. And if you hold somebody to 24, a Lincoln Riley offense, you win the game. That's the truth. Okay.
I think what's standing out too on both sides is, and I think it's probably just this game. I don't think we saw it as much against Wisconsin, but Minnesota clearly felt like we can sort of outflank and outplay USC on the edges in this game and in space and on the perimeter. Minnesota threw the ball more than 10 yards 4 times in this game. They were 1 for 4. The one was that big one at the end where I'm not totally sure what Jalen Smith was doing, but looked kind of covered 2 and then just gave up sort of right away the only spot where you can throw that ball and got Minnesota off and going. But other than that, 14 of 14 for Minnesota, 10 yards and in, 9 yards and in, I guess. And so much of it was, let's get it outside. Let's block those guys and make USC run with us. And again, they did it sort of with their defensive backs too. Minnesota, like they pressed a bit, but so much of it was, let's sit way back. Let's get going forward on the snap and let's tackle them right away as soon as anything gets going back there. And the fact that USC really couldn't win on either side on the perimeter. Again, it's you could talk about the offensive lines, the defensive lines all day, and those are definitely key. But if you're not going to win consistently there, you got to win everywhere else, and it just wasn't there wasn't enough against Minnesota there on the edges.
If USC can't find a way to hurt people deep, they're in trouble the rest of the year offensively. That's the truth, and so far they haven't. They've had a couple of chances, right? I mean, Zach Branch got loose. He was open. He had a touchdown, and the pass wasn't there. That happens sometimes. He had one that hit him in the face mask. I don't know if he would have scored, but he might have. And
first down?
Hmm?
It's a first down.
It's certainly a first down, and it may be a lot more than that. I mean, there was room to go, and he was running full speed. Those guys need to be able to make some plays downfield. And if you have to get rid of it quickly, that means you may be talking about some fades to Jacoby Lane and to Deuce Robinson, right? And take advantage of those mismatches. You have to do something to hurt them downfield, because Minnesota wasn't even worried about it. They were not worried that USC was going to beat them deep. And when you're not worried about that, it makes everything hard offensively.
Jacoby Lane caught 2 passes in the first 3 snaps of the game with USC. 2 passes on the first 3 snaps. That was it.
Yeah,
0 for
I,
6
I,
on
had,
targets to Jacoby Lane the rest of the game.
I had wondered whether he got back on the bus after that. I mean, he just left the game, and that's somebody that we had talked about how he may very well establish himself as the #1 guy, and it looked against Wisconsin like he might have, and then he disappears for 56 minutes. All right, whatever. I don't want to talk about Minnesota anymore. I'm just going to make an executive decision that we're not going to talk about it. I will talk about the Game Time app, though, because sometimes you want to go to a football game. Maybe not right now, but at some point in the future, you may want to. And if you want to go to a game and the games are allegedly a sellout, but you know that there are going to be 20,000 empty seats, that's because those empty seats are in the secondary market. Go find them. The best place to find them is on the Game Time app. Or gametime.co if you have your laptop and you're old school and you don't have a phone. Maybe you're 70 years old and you don't have a smartphone. I don't know. You can find it there too. Lots of tickets, good prices. You get a discount. I think it's $20 if you put in on3 ON and the number 3. $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. They're fair terms. Go out and get tickets to the game. Look, USC needs a home field advantage. I mean, maybe once a year USC actually has a legitimate home field advantage, and I know the fan base is dispirited, so probably a bunch of people will stay home and just leave their seats empty. Don't do that. Get to the game. I'm going to be at the game. Come by, say hello. Bring me a Coke and a hot dog, whatever. I don't even like hot dogs, but I appreciate the thought.
I just looked right now. There's available seats directly across from Mark Hulkin in the press box. I mean, if you're not jumping on those, I don't know.
I mean, well, Mark, if somebody buys those seats on the Game Time app, will you wave at them from across the stadium? There you go.
I'm looking for every untrained eye in the stadium. Wave.
Yeah. No, this is fantastic. Okay, go to Game Time app, download it, put in on3, get your tickets, show up at the Coliseum, show up early, make a day of it. I mean, not too early because it's a 12:30 game, so you're not going to be there that long. But whatever. Just get the tickets. All right, guys. Let's talk about Penn State. Let's start with this. How important is this game, Mark?
This is their playoff game. This is the game of the year for USC. Look, they're either going to be 4-2 or they're going to be 3-3. I know where I'd like them to be at the end of this game, and it's not 3-3. This is all right. You got punched in the gut. Let's see how firm you are. This is a gut check game, and I'm not concerned about the defense not showing up, doing their job. I'm at the point now where I am laser focused on the offense, on the play calling. We've talked about the offensive line enough. Maybe the solution is taking the play calling away from Lincoln Riley. Let him focus on being a head coach instead of being an offensive guru. This game is huge. Literally, if USC wins this game, all of a sudden now everyone's going to feel good again. They're pointing in the right direction. Let's build off of that momentum and keep going forward. We've got the toughest part of the schedule behind us. They lose this game at home, and if they look anything like they did on the road against Minnesota, yeah, this is going to be a long season. There's no other way to say it. This game is their season. You cannot come out of this game looking like you did last year. And that's kind of the sense. This team right now is kind of teeter-tottering. They know they have the ability to play better, but for some reason they just can't keep the rhythm going. They can't just go up and back down and up and back down. They got to figure it out. And you need to be able to do it against a marquee team. Typically, we don't think of a James Franklin team as a marquee team that you have to go out and prove yourself against. You got to do this time. This time,
number 4 in the country.
Think where USC would be had they won that game against Minnesota. That's the difference. It's all about perception. Don't tell me Penn State's the 4th best team in the country. They're not. They're there because of a process of elimination. Teams in front of them lost. Same thing would have happened with USC. Doesn't mean they are a legitimate top 10 team, but when you start thinking that you are, you start playing like you are. I don't know where USC's psyche is right now.
I don't know if they're number 4. I do think they're a legitimate top 10 team, but
Talking about USC.
yeah. All right, Eric, how important is this game? Mark seems to think that this game is critical. I'll be honest with you. I think it decides the season. Are we right about this?
Oh, I'm done then. Thank you. Good job. Yeah, look, if you beat Penn State and then something goes wrong and you lose to Maryland and Washington and UCLA and whatever, right? Then and it's like, all right, well, I guess they won that game. But yeah, you're right. If you're just looking at this game in a vacuum, what does it mean if USC beats Penn State? I think I mentioned it earlier where Penn State I think was that team. The Big Ten is without the new guys. It's Ohio State is Michigan. It's Penn State constantly like trying to knock on the door, like let me in, let me in, let me in, and they keep it locked and don't let them in. And then it's like 8 teams that every once in a while can sort of recover enough fumbles and win games to be like the 4th team in the Big Ten. USC had to come in and establish themselves ahead of Penn State this season. And here's the game. I mean, again, teams will win and lose, and the record at the end will be whatever it is. But it's huge for USC to get Penn State at home. Again, when you look at the Big Ten schedule they got and the misses and who you get when and who you get at home and on the road and all of that, the schedule's okay this year. And this is one of those reasons was because you got Penn State at this point at home. And yes, I think you need to go out and be able to definitively say, yeah, we're better than that team that is constantly like the next best team in the Big Ten and establish yourself there. You deal with whatever else happens the rest of the way after that, but tons of recruits are there. You had the AP and coaches polls just absolutely drop USC like a rock out of the top 25 after that Minnesota loss. There's that sort of turn is happening right now, and yeah, none of that really matters in terms of wins and losses, but you got to catch yourself, and this is a major opportunity for USC to do that.
Yeah. If you beat Penn State, who's currently ranked number 4, even if they may not be the 4th best team in the country, you're 4-2 with wins against LSU and Penn State, and you can feel good that you can play with anybody. Your recruits feel good that this is a program that's really on the upswing, and you have some winnable games between now and Notre Dame. I'm not saying they're going to win all of them. I don't trust this team enough to say that, but they're going to win. But if they beat Penn State, they're going to win the bulk of those. They may win them all, but they're going to win the bulk of those, and they're going to put themselves in a position where the Notre Dame game is going to be meaningful, right? It's going to get you to 9 wins. It's going to get you to 10 wins. If they lose this one, then I'm really worried. This sort of feels like Pete Carroll's second year. USC was, I think, 2-2, maybe 3-2. They played Cal at the Coliseum. They got down in that one. Pretty big, maybe 18 points. And Kareem Kelly caught a touchdown pass in the end zone that if there was a replay, probably wouldn't count it. USC came back and beat Cal and then went on a run. I'm not saying this team is like the 0-2 team. I am saying that was a defining point in the season. If USC loses that Cal game, Pete Carroll's second year looks very, very different. His tenure might look very different. I don't know. The Trojans need to win this one. I think they're going to play well. I really do. This is a resilient team. It's a team that's shown character all year. I think they're going to come out and play hard. I think the defense is going to be aggressive. I think they're going to hit. I think they're going to play hard, and I think they're going to play well. They have to win it. There's no moral victories. 3-3 start in the first half of the season. There are no moral victories. I don't care how well you play. Mark?
I think we just need to get away from the defense. That's not the issue this year. Ironically, the defense is not USC's issue this year. Penn State has a fairly good defense. How is this offense all of a sudden going to find itself in less than a week? That's the problem.
Well, in 2 of the last 3 weeks, the defense had a chance to win the game with a stop and didn't get it.
But we
So let's not kid ourselves that this
shouldn't
is
be asking USC's defense to win the game, though. We want USC's defense to keep them in the game. Because
they're doing that. They're doing that. They're playing.
Absolutely.
They're playing dramatically better than they did last year and the year before and the year before. And they're keeping the offense in games, giving the offense a chance to win it. What I'm suggesting is, at this point, I don't know that you can trust the offense to score 35 or 40 points a game. The defense is going to have to get some stops at the end to win games.
About 24 points.
Well, they're going to have to. I mean, it was 10 before the last 2 drives. They're going to have to get a stop, and they may have to get a stop against Penn State, because I don't expect that the offense is going to light up Penn State's defense. That doesn't mean look, you have the team you have. Last year we knew the offense had to score on just about every drive to win a game, right? And you'd say it's unfair, but still you knew it. This year it's different. The offense is having problems. If you're up 7 and it's the end of the game, the defense is going to have to come up and make a stop. And if they don't, USC is going to lose a lot of games that we don't want to lose. That's the truth. And that may be unfair to put that on the defense, but that's where we are. And I think they'll play. Okay. All right, let's talk about this then. Let's do the predictions. Let's just jump right into it. I got 4 games I want to ask about, because there are 4 pretty big games on the schedule. This is a good week of college football. Let's start with 2 of my least favorite teams playing up in Eugene, Oregon and Ohio State. How's this one going to go down? Mark Holcomb.
Ask me if I care.
Do you care?
I don't care.
Okay. Eric, do you care enough to offer a prediction?
Yeah, I think Ohio State's going to win this game. Look, we love to root against Oregon, and there's probably some of that. I think we got road trip stuff in this game. That 1-8 number is going to be up against it with a couple of games that we're going to watch here. But I think Ohio State's got enough in that one.
Yeah, Oregon is starting to play better than they were earlier in the year. They have a lot of talent. They have a fantastic home field advantage. I do think Ohio State's better. I think Ohio State wins, but it's going to be a close game. And I'm going to assume that Dan Lanning does something stupid to cost his team at the end. That's my prediction. Mark, do you want to weigh in, or are you?
I think Chip Kelly will find a way to screw it up for Ohio State. How's that?
Okay.
You guys, Dan Lanning. Ohio State, they look better this year. They're a paper tiger.
Hey, Tolkien's getting chippy today. That's why people want to sit on the other side of the stadium from him. They're a little bit nervous to get too close. Look, I've been in the same room with Mark. He's a good guy. You'll be all right. Okay. Number 2, Red River rivalry, Texas OU. McKinney, who you got?
The college football-iness of the season makes it seem like this is a easy Texas win, and then somehow they remember that they're college kids and they trip and fall in a rivalry game, and Oklahoma wins. So I'm going to say all of that, and I'm going to predict that Texas still has enough to beat a not great Oklahoma team. But this is this past weekend, right? This past weekend was, boy, let's start looking at next weekend because nothing's going on this weekend. And then it's like, oh, that's right. It's college football. And that's what happens.
College football is wild. It is. And this is a rivalry game. And we all know that weird things happen in rivalry games. What do you think, Mark? Would you like to weigh in on this one, or do you want to skip this one?
I don't think we're going to have wacky weekend two weekends in a row. I think Texas rolls them.
Yeah. It's hard to see OU scoring many points. I mean, OU's going to have to get a lot of breaks to stay in this game. They're going to need punt blocks and fumbles. And unless Texas gets them the game, I think Texas rolls them. And you know what? I'm okay with that. If Texas can beat them by 40, that's fine. But if they can beat them by 60 or more, that's even better. Ole Miss LSU. Mark, what do you think about this one? Game's at Tiger Stadium. Both teams have a loss. Both teams can score points.
That Ole Miss loss early in the year, that kind of, I don't know, that was a weird loss. I'm going LSU. I think the home field advantage, rivalry game, sort of. Yeah, I'm going LSU. I'm not going to give you a score.
Eric is okay. That's fine. I'm not going to force it on you. Eric is Lane Kiffin Tiger bait?
Yeah, I would take in the home team either way, wherever it was played.
Yeah, yeah, I feel the same way about it. I think it's going to be a high scoring game, but that's a tough place to play, and it's going to be a pretty wild atmosphere. I like LSU. Okay, let's pick the one game that we actually care about. USC Penn State. Eric, start us off.
Are you gonna make me do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just look, Penn State has all the right answers for where USC struggles. And if you couldn't figure it, if you couldn't even figure it out against Minnesota like mid-game, right? Hey, we gotta get this fixed. And especially after what we'd seen from USC in the second half of every game, where it was they had all the right answers and it just got to a point at Minnesota where it's like I'm pressing the buttons and nothing's happening. We're trying to do this. That is by far the scariest thing about this. Nick Singleton, the running back for Penn State, is absolutely going to play in this game. I think that kid is unbelievable. He's the best back I think USC will see all year, and they've got two or three of them that they can roll up there. The offensive line is very good defensively. Again, are they light on the interior? Can they play in the back end? They're going to bring defensive ends. They're going to bring really good defensive ends. If you couldn't solve Minnesota's defensive ends, I just again we're days out. Maybe USC's got some walk on that all of a sudden is like, oh, this guy can play tackle. But no, all the spots where USC feels really vulnerable is where Penn State feels pretty strong. I know you love when I have to do this. I don't love to do it, but 24 Penn State, something like that. I do think you're right. I think SC plays hard. I don't think this is something where they just fold and get run over. They're at home. I think they're going to show up. I think they're going to keep it tight. I think Penn State's a good team and has it where USC doesn't.
Mark?
So I was just looking at the line. You got Penn State coming in LA right now. It's a 5.5 point. Their USC's a dog. The over-under is what, 48? So low scoring contest. We're putting that we have to rely on USC's defense this year, right, Chris? Right?
I think we're going to have to, whether we want to or not.
So on the strength of Michael Lance, his leg, and USC's defense, how about 24-20 USC?
I very much want that to happen, Mark.
Okay. I'm going to make that happen for you, Chris.
Please do. Please do. I can't handle many more weekends like this past weekend. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up. That's stupid. I'm a grown man. What happens in these games shouldn't affect me that much. I stayed up till 3 a.m. writing an article, which I had to edit a couple times because I kept saying stuff that I shouldn't say. Okay. Here's the thing. Penn State is a better team than USC. But Penn State, the whole is less than the sum of the parts with them this year. They're talented all over the place. They can throw, they can run, they have a good defense, but for some reason they have a really difficult time putting people away. They haven't played as well as you would expect them to play. USC is going to play hard. They're going to give it a great effort. They have to find a way to protect Miller Moss. And I don't know who on that roster is going to block Abdul Carter. I haven't seen that person yet. And because I don't think they can block him, and because I don't think Lincoln Riley will stick with the running game, I don't think they're going to average 7.5 yards from the running backs per carry in this game anyway. I think it's a very difficult game for USC to win. That being said, the Trojans have a chance. They're playing at home. They have some talented athletes. They have some pride. It's college football. It's not going to take much more than a couple of mistakes from Penn State, because I think the game will be close. But if I had to bet everything on the outcome of this game, I'd bet on Penn State. I think that's a safe bet. So I'm going to pick.
What do you think about running an offensive line with a tackle eligible all game long?
Look, this is what I said after that Minnesota game. I said, I don't look. I know you like the tight end, right? I know Lincoln Riley likes to have the tight end on the field, and you can do some more things with him there. If you went 7 offensive linemen, a quarterback, and 3 wide receivers, or two wide receivers and a running back, I don't know. I don't like you just outsize them up front. And if they're going to go around the end, you can do it by going up the sideline and then coming back onto the field after you get around all those offensive linemen.
Yeah, look, I don't know if I'd go 7, but taking the tight end out, putting in an extra tackle, and seeing what we can do with that, I'm in favor. They have to try something creative. I don't know if Lincoln Riley will. But I don't think they can just line up and do what they've been doing, because Penn State is good enough defensively up front that they're going to give Miller Moss a really hard time. And I don't think this is the sort of team that USC is going to hold to 14 points. Penn State hasn't been great offensively, especially in light of the talent they have. Those backs are going to get in space and they're going to make some plays. That's just going to happen. So I think the answer is 24-20 Penn State. I really don't want to be right about that.
Can we get like a tip ball? Can we get a tip ball up in the air that's something, right? Something like that leads to kind of some big momentum and that, right? Eric Gentry's punch fumble against Michigan, like that's a play. And Kamari Ramsey ripping it out. Those are really good plays. The SC defense, I think, deserves a thrown ball off an offensive lineman's helmet that gets kicked up in the air and intercepted, right? Like that's, again, it's not like they need that. They can play well enough where they're okay. But boy, a break like that in a game like this, let's do it.
Look, the dispirited USC fans are saying USC has no chance to beat Penn State. That's ridiculous. Vanderbilt just beat Alabama. It's college football. Almost everybody has a chance to win. And USC is not Vandy. I mean, USC has some players on this team, and they beat LSU. They're a good football team. Not a great one, but they're a good football team. They can win this game at home. They can. But they are going to have to get some breaks like that. I think Penn State's going to have to put the ball on the ground. They're going to have to throw a couple picks. Something like that's going to have to happen. But look, I've seen Penn State games that I thought were less likely to be USC wins. I mean, in 1991 they lost to Memphis and had a number 5 Penn State team come into the Coliseum and beat them. And then they only won 2 games the rest of the year. So, I mean, it's college football. You don't know what's going to happen. But if I had to bet, Penn State's been a better team so far this year. Mark, go ahead.
Encyclopedia Eric, what's Drew Alar this year, passing? What's his completion percentage, touchdown to interception ratio?
Oh, come on, man. I'm still working off the Minnesota game hangover. I haven't really
Well, I was just going to say
dived into all that.
It would be great to see one of USC's defensive backs, whether at nickel or at safety, jump a route, pick 6, do something like a Will Johnson did against USC. That's what's been missing. We've had that tip, volleyball interception pick 6 already. That happened against Wisconsin. I wanted to see an aggressive USC player make the play, not just the ball. Oh, look, it's here.
And I think the Trojans are going to have to be aggressive defensively. I think they're going to have to generate a pass rush. I don't think they can rush 4, because rushing 4 is not getting it done, and it hasn't all year. So they're going to have to get aggressive and see if the back end can hold up. But I think the back end can. But they're going to have. They can't just let him. They can't just let Alar sit back there and throw the ball, because so far this year that has not been a recipe for getting pressure on the quarterback. Now,
Here you
that
go.
being said,
Oh, go ahead. Finish
it
yours.
has been a recipe for holding people to 20-something points. So
I got Mark's homework assignment here. So he's 10 in the country in completion percentage. They're fine letting him throw short. I think he's like 60 in yards a game, but 9-1 touchdown interception. They are not making him go win games, drive the ball down the field and throw for 300 yards. They are comfortable kind of taking that and letting those running backs do a lot of work. The one thing to keep in mind, Penn State has been really bad in the first quarter. Slow to start offensively, cannot sort of throw that gas pedal down and get going. You know, sounds like another team for the
Right.
most part outside of that first drive against Wisconsin. So, but it's one of those, right? Who could find that early? Can USC get that going at home? Can you jump out to a lead? I don't think Penn State ever feels like, hey, we can't give the ball to our running backs. I mean, I think it'll be a lot like Michigan, where no, we never need to pass. That clock is ticking down, ticking down, ticking down. We're still going to run and run and run. So, but anytime you need to make James Franklin really think hard about something, that's going to be a win for USC.
Yeah.
they don't have a lot of great wins this year. They beat Illinois, who's had a pretty good season, but I don't know that I put much stock into that. They beat a West Virginia team in the opener that's not very good. And they played some games where they didn't look impressive. Like I said, Penn State has not played as well as you would expect them to play with the roster they have. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything for Saturday, but I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be in the 20s, and I think USC is going to need a break or two to win it. Maybe we'll get it. All right, are we done, guys? This has been a depressing. I mean, what are you going to do though? I mean, you lose
Look,
to Minnesota.
We can cheer some people up, right? So right now you get to wearesc.com, you use code FIGHT ON, we got 50% off an annual membership ahead of we talked about it, a game of the year type thing on USC's schedule for Penn State. It's tough, right? It's tough. You got to rebound like the team does as a fan. You got to rebound. You got to get there for Penn State. You got to turn this into a home atmosphere. Minnesota fans showed up. They showed up. Wisconsin fans were in the Coliseum. Penn State fans are going to be at the Coliseum. Penn State has to like build a new airport to get their team out here for this game. They have to leave Thursday. They got to drive an hour and a half to get to an airport that can actually get a plane on it that can fly them out here. Penn State fans are going to follow. They're going to be there for that game. And it's important that USC fans turn the Coliseum into a home atmosphere, because these Big Ten road trips are going to be tough for USC. They're going to be tough because fans are going to show up, especially these first couple years and USC's first trip out to the places.
Yep, I agree with all that. Okay, show up at the Coliseum. Show up at the Coliseum, be loud. Let's see if we can get a win. That'd be nice. Next week's show will be a lot more fun to do if we get a win. Okay, that's it. We have nothing else to say. Until next week. Fight on, everybody.